bringing Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul. He's the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He just returned from a trip to Poland. You were there about a week ago. I wanted to ask you about these MiGs because this is a big topic of conversation. What is the difference between sending Javelin missiles, sending Stinger missiles into Ukraine, and you were there in the area where the United States is funneling these things through Poland? What's the difference between sending that lethal weaponry in and sending in a squadron of MiGs?
I don't think there is. And I think that's a problem with the administration not willing to send in these MiGs. Zelensky has asked for them, for God's sakes, and we need to give them all the help we can give them. We are sending, I saw the operation that we're sending into Ukraine, lethal weapons like javelins, like, that hit the tanks, like Stinger missiles that can hit helicopters. But what they need are the high airspace weapons like surface-to-air missile. They need the drones that are weaponized with Hellfire missiles. All former Soviet, weapons that the Ukrainians can operate. And mostly important, these MiGs, it could have been very easy. The plan was that the pilots, Ukraine, were going to come into Poland and fly them back into Ukraine. That was botched. There was a division in the administration, and then they came up with this German idea. All Poland wanted, they wanted 2 F-16s and more force protection from our troops. I think that was a simple, easy request we could have given them. And now Zelensky doesn't have his fighter jets.
All right. Well, Jen Psaki, Congressman, and thanks for being here, offered an explanation for all this. She was asked about it in the briefing just a short time ago and said this.
What our assessment is based on is how to prevent a world war. There's a difference between an anti-tank weapon, a shoulder-fired missile, an aircraft, and a fighter jet that could cross a border and actually conduct operations on Russian soil.
To that, you say what?
Well, I think that's what perhaps the generals are believing. It's too provocative. I think we should give them everything they need to fight this war and not sit back passively. I think the concern is that the retaliation could be strong. I mean, I think, we don't want them to invade a NATO nation. Of course, Putin will never do that because if NATO responds in full force, he can't even handle what he's doing in Ukraine right now. But I think the thinking is you don't want to back the scorpion too much in the corner and he stings you out of desperation, and that would be short-term tactical nukes. I think that would be the nightmare scenario that we all fear the most.
Congressman, I don't know if you heard Lindsey Graham, who was here earlier, but he thought that the Biden administration backed down on the MiGs in the face of a threat from Vladimir Putin that may have been a genuine threat, may have just been rhetoric, may have been a hollow threat. But here's what the Wall Street Journal said in an editorial about the United States reversing position on these MiGs. Quote, what happened between Mr. Blinken's endorsement and the Pentagon's rejection? It's not hard to conclude that the White House blinked for fear of provoking Mr. Putin, who is demanding that the West stop arming Ukraine. Do you believe Biden blinked?
I do in this case. And I've been, supportive of the overall efforts to get these weapons in. It should have been done months ago instead of the last minute. Time is of the essence now. I think Secretary Blinken was generally supportive of this idea. I met with him, and we talked about this very issue. He seemed to be supportive. I think for some reason the Pentagon had a difference of opinion. They thought it was too provocative. It's too bad because they need these MiGs. They need the air power. Particularly as you look at the convoy coming to Kyiv and the ring of steel.
It would decimate it. But let me just follow up on that quickly. If he blinked in this case, is Vladimir Putin looking at him and saying, oh, he's going to blink every time I make a threat? So he'll continue to make threats. He'll continue to try to foil whatever plans we have to back up Ukraine.
Well, that's precisely why Putin is in Ukraine, because he saw a weak president after Afghanistan. He saw him blinking, the whole time. When he did the Keystone pipeline, but really the Nord Stream 2 sanctions that I pushed in the House to basically waive those in the national interest of the United States, Putin saw a weakness. And then the New START treaty conceded to that with nothing in return. I think Putin smelled weakness. He made a decision to go in. In my judgment, he miscalculated. He went in too big. And I think the strength of the Ukrainian people is stronger than the soldiers in Russia.
And perhaps that's why the Wall Street Journal piece concludes with, Congressman, as he escalates Putin, will he use chemical weapons or tactical nukes? Will NATO refuse to respond then because it fears World War III? The big mistake, the Journal writes, may let Putin believe his threats will make NATO stand down. His frustration is clearly growing, Congressman, as this notes. He's bombing cities. He bombed a maternity hospital yesterday. The death toll is rising. The pictures are horrific. These are atrocities. The world is watching and simply asking how we can all continue to watch this happen. What needs to be done next, Congressman, as we see this back and forth over what is the most powerful response to Putin in this moment?
Well, we passed a $3 billion, lethal aid package last night. That's going to be helpful, but I think we need to stop, surrendering to his threats. And at some point in time, I don't know when, but the threshold's going to be too high for us to sit on the sidelines. What happens if he uses chemical weapons? These thermobaric bombs that are incendiary, that suck the oxygen and breathe fire into people on the ground. We have reports that that's happening right now. These crimes against humanity, these mass graves, the attack on the hospital, a maternity hospital with children. And they did one prior to that in Kyiv, a children's hospital. At what point do these crimes against humanity merit us going in and stopping this?
Well, the world has stood by and watched while this has gone on before. Let's hope they don't do the same thing again this time. Congressman McCaul, good to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate